Welcome to this episode of Truth Seekers, where His Grace Bishop Emilianos of Meloa will answer questions sent in by the youth with a member of the youth.
Hello again, Max. I've got one more question for you. And it's not going to be an easy one, I think. How can you believe in something that can't be scientifically proven? What do you think?
First of all, that's a loaded question. because you're assuming from the very beginning that it can't be scientifically proven. So we should assume it's an open question. Can it be scientifically proven? Many archaeologists have gathered, details from the Exodus period and even the time of Abraham. And in fact, many of the disputed places and locations of events that occurred in the history of the scriptures that were previously many professors were skeptical of have been not only located but also shown to the whole world. We have, for example, the city of Jericho with the walls deep in the earth. Another unique finding was even Sodom and Gomorrah. There were several tons of sulfuric material next to a volcano, yes, but with an 80% purity, which of course is much greater than that, which would be about 40% that you'd expect after an eruption. And there were many little homes with people inside them, right next to each other, in different positions that demonstrate that this, yes, most likely was in fact the city of Gomorrah. There are a great range of different artifacts that we have even from the Dead Sea, like chariot wheels that were found deep in the ravines. But setting aside that information, let's look to the Gospels. So we have Jesus. Now, there are some people today who say that Jesus himself wasn't a historical figure. There are many people who are now perpetrating this idea that Jesus perhaps not only was a fictional figure, but that he is an adaptation of other myths from times. The fact is that we have eyewitnesses, and this is the strongest evidence, you see, because all of the people that followed Jesus were ordinary men, as documented. And there are historians also who have demonstrated that Luke is the most reliable historian himself. There's nothing quite like his work, and he has been tested time and time again because his claims are outrageous. Who would go and say that a man not only performed miracles on others, but that he himself was resurrected? This is outrageous. But it's not sufficient to set it all aside, because we have people many years after who died. And the early Christians themselves died in such great numbers that it's a miracle that Christianity even lasted through the first century, let alone till today. As far as historical accounts go, yes, Christ was indeed a historical figure, and anyone who wants to, if they don't want to look at the scriptures, fine, you can go to Josephus, you can go to Tacitus. These are two external sources that demonstrate that Christ not only lived, but he also died on a cross. And there is no other plausible explanation for the empty tomb other than the resurrection, if you take into account the punishment for soldiers who were caught lying on their duty. And the Jewish hierarchy themselves paid those soldiers to guard the tomb, because they wanted to guard against anyone who had proclaimed that Christ had risen. Anyone who wishes to say that Jesus Christ wasn't a historical figure, or that he didn't rise from the dead, is actually working against what history has recorded. Physical evidence can only take you so far.
Thank you, Max, for sharing your thoughts. It's obvious that your journey to Orthodoxy was one that involved a lot of search, and that's why you have a lot of knowledge, and you read so much and you looked into so many different things to end up believing into something that it's not visible, right? Because Christianity and Christian values, they're not visible. You either believe or you don't believe.
But we're not wishful thinkers as Christians. In fact, we're thoroughly grounded in both evidence, scripture, and science now. So because pure evidentialism or empiricism is unreliable on its own, because there's no philosophical grounding as to why you should use this method, we can turn to the ontological or the philosophical methods of determining the existence of God. One of them, of course, is that if you were to presuppose that there was some cosmic explosion, say the Big Bang for instance, well, where does the material come from that creates the initial explosion, and what triggers the explosion? Because as we all know, nothing can't create something. And if you believe that, well, then you believe anything. And you'd be better off believing in the resurrection because at least that way you have peace.
Myself, I was born into the faith, and I guess I didn't have second thoughts about it. Although I learned a few things here and there about other religions, but there is one thing that I wanted to mention regarding how can we believe in something that we can't scientifically prove. My mind goes back to St. Gregory Palamas when he spoke about the uncreated energies. So it's like you've got the essence of God, which is unachievable and incomprehensible, and you've got the energies of God, which is God himself, but it's the way God communes with us. It's like you have the sun, that you can't approach the essence of the sun, but you have the rays of the sun that they come to us and they give us light, and through the rays we understand what the sun is. Right? So St. Gregory Palamas talked about the uncreated energies of God, which is God, as we said, and God gives essence to all things. That's one thing. So if something is material, it's because God gave essence to this thing. Also, the uncreated energies, they give life to everything that has life. So if there is a flower or if there is an animal, they have life, they grow, they die. The uncreated energies of God, God himself gives life to this. But also, they give wisdom to the humans, This is also from the uncreated energies. But the greatest thing that happens is that the uncreated energies of God, they make us God-like by grace. And this is the greatest thing. If we were to go one step back, that we said that we get the wisdom, the wisdom is not as great as the union of God, which is the final step, the greatest gift of God to us. So this means that if we try to understand something which is greater with something that is less great, it can happen. Like the computer itself cannot understand how the humans created the computer, because the computer does not have intellect. The humans, they have intellect. What I'm trying to say is that you can't explain something greater with lesser means. So you can't explain God with science. Science is created and God is not created. God is the creator. The creation cannot explain the creator, basically. So we either believe or we don't believe. But when you get into the Christian faith, when you become a Christian, when you become someone who prays, you get to experience all these uncreated energies of love, of God. You get to experience His love, His joy, His happiness, His eternity. And when you experience these things, you can't prove it scientifically, but your emotions, your whole being experiences this, and you become a different person. And this is the proof that God exists, but it's not a scientifically proof. It's an experience.
It's stronger than evidence because it's knowing. It's not.
Exactly, you get the knowledge.
Yes. It's direct knowledge, not knowledge by inference of the senses. That's how it's distinguished. But for people who are unaware of that Christians even experience these things, it can certainly help to delve into the scientific aspects of our Christian faith and their establishment. Because as a person who grew up outside any Christian denomination, let alone Orthodoxy, it certainly helped for me to investigate every avenue of the scientific and metaphysical perspective that I could first, so that I would later be able to embrace these greater principles which are so distant that you don't even see them on the edge of the horizon as someone who has never experienced God, because there are many people in like manner who live their whole lives without knowing that this is even possible for people. Yeah, that's how
Thank you very much, Max.